Welcome to Eviliv, the live media commentary show that answers the question, what does human flesh taste like? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we are reviewing Showtime's Season 2 of Yellowjackets. That is right, the show where it makes a lot of promises but doesn't really deliver on any of them in any satisfying way. And yet I still keep watching it. All right, so my initial thoughts of this season are, at least we got the human flesh part. Like, that's the part that I really was looking for. I wanted to see them start eating each other. That was the promise of the first season. And we open it in this season with them doing just that. So I was happy with that. But as soon as you get to the adults, like in the future, like modern day, the versions of the kids, that's where it starts to fall apart for me. Because really all the story is based around is the death of Adam. And them finding out about it, and the family finding out about it, and all the other friends finding out about it. And it's not really a satisfying ending, not even remotely, to that problem. And the way they wrap it up, and I'll get to it in a second here, is wildly unsatisfying. I just want more. I want more. That's all. And really, that's the bottom line of this entire series. If I was writing it, of course I would like it because I'm the one writing it, but I would add actual satisfying moments rather than just teases of more questions that then not get answered. So you literally, if you're watching season 1, you're only going to get any of those answers if you watch season 2. But not all of the answers, because then you would have to watch season 3. But season 3 doesn't exist yet. So we're just sitting here with our thumbs in our butt, wondering when we can sit up, because it's really uncomfortable with your thumb in your butt. And you're not getting answers. You're just sitting there. It sucks. All right. It tastes like your neighbor Steve. So you broke down, huh? The road hit, the sky hit. All right. Thanks for joining live, man. Okay, so I may be a little bit harsh in my initial thoughts, because I did continue watching this and there are good moments in it, like the first season. This is a more satisfying season than the first, but it still is lacking. And it's mainly because I don't think it knows what it wants to be. I know what it promises it to be, but that's not what it is. And that's the most frustrating part of all of this. So for those of you who maybe didn't watch the first season, or maybe just are unfamiliar with Yellowjackets as a series, the log line is a wildly talented high school a wildly talented high school girl soccer team becomes the unlucky survivors of a plane crash deep in the Canadian wilderness. And what this show does every episode is sort of cut it in half between what happened then, during the time they were surviving from the plane crash, to now, when they're all grown, dealing with their own lives and the repercussions of what happened. And so everything in between are just little suggestions and glimpses and inferences and flashbacks and stuff like that. It was created by Lyle and Bart Nickerson, and it originally premiered November 14, 2021. I did not actually write when season 2 premiered. Sorry about that, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Okay, so I want to sort of, I'm not going to go play by play per episode, but there are some story beats that are really important to cover so that you ultimately understand. Aaron, hello, governor. Top of the morning to you, eh? So that you understand really where season 2 is taking over from season 1. And ultimately what season 2 leaves off the table and suggests are errors from season 1. So what I really loved about season 1 was the promise of not just the girls wanting to then, not really wanting to, but needing to turn to cannibalism in order to survive, which I wanted. But I also wanted to explore what this entity was that was sort of controlling some of them, pushing them around. Some of them were worshiping. Like, there was this promise of something. And so I really wanted to explore that in season 2, along, of course, with the cannibalism. What I ended up getting was the cannibalism. Not as much as I was expecting, but still, any cannibalism is good cannibalism. It's so weird I'm talking about eating dead people as like a good thing. But there was no suggestion of the other entity. In fact, at the end, they downplay it as if it didn't exist at all. And it was all in the girls' heads. But that was belied by the fact that, what's her name? Thaisa was telling Van about the one with no eyes when she finally goes and meets up with Van and as the, when she was sleepwalking as a young woman, and Van was like following her around to see where she would lead, and she led her to all these little tree posts that were marked with the cult symbol. And so when they were in the forest, when they were dealing with that symbol, it was very real that there was this entity. When they grew up and got outside into their real lives and they're reflecting back on it, the crazier the story starts to get in their adult lives, the more insistent they are that there was no entity. There was no man with no eyes. It was just them, and they were the wilderness. They were the thing driving it, which in reality is probably the truth if you ever find yourself in that situation, because I know growing up, I was way into the occult, and I made shit up in my head a lot. Stuff that I thought was real and really, on reflection, clearly was not. I mean, there was one time where a friend of mine convinced me that he had morphine drops in high school, right? So, and all it was cold sore drops. So it just numbed the bit of your mouth that it touched. So I thought it was morphine drops, me and another friend, Mike. And so we both took the morphine drops and we were acting like we were high because we convinced ourselves that we were high. And the power that your mind has to convince yourselves of lies is incredible. And you can really, I mean, you know, it's like dying of a broken heart. Well, you're so sad that your body just shuts down. Like there's no reason why you should die. Your heart is literally not broken, but emotionally you are so torn up that you can actually physically die. Same thing, you can convince yourself that you're under the influence of drugs and alcohol or otherworldly spirits and beings. It's weird. It's a little bit embarrassing after the fact when you realize that it was all a lie and you're just sort of playing into it. But it happens and it's true and it's real while you're experiencing it. And so the fact that these girls are experiencing this strange, traumatic, culty type stuff when they're out there and then later reflect on it saying, well, that was really just us. Okay, yeah, that's a real world explanation. Except I don't want real world explanation from a show about cult murders. I want supernatural shit. And the fact that another point that sort of belies the adult version of the fact that it was all just in their heads was that it shows purgatory for people who did die. And then it shows them from their dead perspective looking at this entity, this man or whatever it was. So clearly there was something there. And the whole premise of season 2, as the adults are concerned, is that it's coming back. It's waking up. It wants more from them, right? So that murder with Adam apparently was not good enough. They needed more. And so they sort of go down this rabbit hole of trying to figure it out. And then ultimately, in the final episode, performing a ritual in order to murder one of their own to satisfy. Now, what we have to remember is that in the flashbacks of the series, when it goes back to the girls, and I don't really want to jump ahead too far, but I do want to make this quick point about the sacrifices, is that it was all misunderstood. They never initially wanted to kill each other and eat each other. One of them, which was Lottie, she was ill. She was dying, she believed, in one specific situation that I'll get to in a second. And so she said, don't let my body go to waste. And so she was saying, if I die, eat me. What some of the other characters interpreted was her saying, as the cult leader of the girls, we need to start eating each other. And so they did this whole random playing card draw. Whoever got the queen with the eyes scratched out has to be murdered. That ended up being Nat, who then like runs away from the group because she doesn't want to friggin' die and be eaten by everyone. And she's saved by the missing boy who ends up falling into the ice, and everyone just sort of stands back and lets him drown, and then they eat him. But before they start eating people, I want to talk about the first time they find and eat someone, because it really sets the stage for everything that happens, and it happens really early in season 2. I think the very first episode, actually. Let me make a quick note here, because it gets insane really quick. So if you remember at the end of last season, oh, hold on. Did your wife like season 2? Your wife and I have a different taste in entertainment, but you both like something you feel confident reminding others. Yeah. About to have some time with your daughters, so you'll be sure to rewatch later. Have a great night. Oh, thanks for tuning in, hon. I appreciate you. Have fun with your daughter. So, my wife did enjoy it. I mean, we both watched it together and stuff. One thing that I will make a quick note of before I continue with my review here is that intro music and video, where in season 1 I thought it was way too long and a little annoying, I'm getting a little Stockholm syndrome. Like, I'm starting to really like it. I don't know what it is. If it's just repetition, breeds familiarity, but I'm digging it now. Okay. So in episode 1, Jackie had died at the end of last season, and so they put her body on ice because they can't bury her, so they put her in this like weird shack shed thing. Shauna has been talking to her and seeing her, and so Jackie's been talking back. Now, we don't know if this is entirely in Shauna's head, which we assume is, but with the mystery of stuff happening around in this wilderness area, you never really know what's suggested or hinted at or twisted or whatever versus what's actually happening. So she's talking and seeing Jackie, laughing with her, doing her makeup and her hair, and Jackie's dead. She's like posing her and stuff. And then her ear falls off, Jackie's ear. Shauna ends up like keeping it in her pocket, and then she ultimately eats it. And that's her first chance of getting to taste human flesh. The other girls find out and freak out, and they say, we're just going to burn her body because this is going way too far. And so they make a funeral pyre, they start it on fire, and then it starts storming. And so they all go inside while the funeral pyre with Jackie's body on it is burning down. But then it gets covered with snow, and it starts steaming and slow cooking. And so they all wake the next morning to a slow cooked Jackie corpse, which they're starving to death. And cooked human flesh is much like pork, I'm told. And so they wake to roasted pork, slow cooked pulled pork. And they all lose their minds. And everyone except for the coach goes in there like a ravenous beast, and they're just eating and feeding each other and having a wonderful old time, and they're not really contextualizing that they're eating their friend. They're just having a feast. It's a really beautiful scene that's grotesque and unnerving and uncomfortable, but it's what I wanted from season 1, and I'm so desperately glad that we got it. So this splits the group from all the girls and boys and Coach. Coach refuses to eat other humans because he's latching onto his humanity. But at the same time, he's sick and he's starving to death. And he's starting to have visions of his boyfriend that he broke up with before he came here, and sort of reliving that life as if he didn't leave his boyfriend. And so they're like talking about marriage, and they're having great relationship stuff. And he's just sort of living in this fantasy world of sleep most of the time and not eating at all. So then ultimately, of course, the girls get all hungry again eventually. And that's when, who was it? I think it was Nat, like confronts Lottie. And Lottie is talking about how if you're so upset about what happened, take it out on me. I want you to take out your anger on me. And Nat almost kills Lottie, beating her like Fight Club, just like pounding her freaking face in. She's completely distorted, bruised up, and just like near death. And so all the girls are all standing back aghast watching. And so they sort of take care of Lottie. Molly ends up taking care of Lottie more than anyone else. And everyone's sort of afraid of Nat at this point because she's a super badass. So then Lottie says that thing of, hey, if I die, don't let my body go to waste. She knows that everyone's hungry. If she's dead, she doesn't care. Just let them eat her. What's the big deal? So they end up having this big, when Lottie comes back, or maybe it was before that, where some of the group believes in Nat's ability of hunting and procuring food from wildlife more than they believe in Lottie's spiritual connection as a cult leader and her ability to call down food. Because ultimately what happens is when they're starving, dove or birds start falling out of the sky, and that helps feed them as well. So clearly there's something spiritual going on with Lottie being able to procure food. And then there's the reality of hunting where Nat is able to sometimes procure food, but really not recently. And so there's this big hubbub about, well, who is actually the person that we can trust to get us food? And so there's a big contest. Whoever loses is going to end up like dying or being eaten or something like that. I can't remember. It's like, I don't know, a few days ago that I watched it. So they go on a big hunt separately, and Nat had seen this gigantic white moose before, and now she sees it frozen in the lake. And so all the girls go to find the frozen lake. Meanwhile, Lottie is out freezing to death because she can't find any food. She doesn't have a connection to the wilderness voice in her head anymore. And so she sort of feels all alone and left out there in the wilderness. And all the girls are trying to break through the ice and bring up the moose, but it's a moose. And I don't care how many teenage girls you have together, they're not going to pull a moose out of a frozen lake. And they don't, obviously. And so it sinks down and everyone gets all depressed and everything. Then they go hunting for Lottie and stuff. So all that's happening on the kids, and Coach is staying the hell away from these girls because they're clearly crazy, ready to eat each other. Molly admits to the other girls that she is the one that destroyed the transmitter, which was their saving grace. And so now girls don't trust her. Molly ends up accidentally killing her only friend out there, who she started doing like song and dance stuff with, and musicals and performances and stuff. She actually ends up killing her after admitting that she was the one that stranded them all there. Because again, Molly is a psychopath. And then we go to the adult version of all these people. They'd already killed Adam. And so now Jeff and Shauna, the husband and wife, are burning all of their possessions that Shauna still has of Adam's. And so they go to their barbecue and they burn it all. What doesn't get burned is just a tiny little picture of his driver's license, and their daughter, Callie, finds it. And so she confronts the mother. The mother ends up coming truthful with everything, telling her the truth about everything except for what she had to do when she was out there in the wilderness as a child. And so now the daughter, instead of being antagonistic and aggressive toward the parents, actually is understanding. And she's like, okay, well, if everyone's in on this in the family, I'm going to support it too, and I'm going to help in any way I possibly can. Meanwhile, the cops are now on their tail because there's a dead body, and it's leading to the fact that Shauna was dating him, having an affair. And so now they're pressing on Shauna. Then Nat, of course, at the end of last season disappeared. She was abducted by these cult members. It turns out the cult is, of course, led by Lottie as an adult. And Lottie was once in a mental institution after she got back out. But then once she became an adult and, she sort of got out of the mental institution, she started this little cult. And she says it's not a cult, but it clearly is a cult. Everyone's behavior and everything. So they abducted her because they were watching her and they didn't want her to kill herself. And so they just acted the only way they thought they could, which was bust in the door, grab her, and get out of town. So they allow her to recover, and she sort of lashes out at them and almost kills one of the girls and then ends up bonding with that same girl. But Nat is, at this point, hanging out with Lottie and trying to figure out what the hell this cult is and what the point of everything is. And really, it's a self-help place. That's ultimately what it comes down to. There's no like weird, mysterious anything. The problem is Lottie at this point, now that Nat's there, is starting to get these visions again. She's starting to hear the communication with the wilderness again. And so she wants to then sacrifice to that wilderness one of the other girls. And so she ultimately, all of the girls get together and meet up with Lottie at the compound, and they all have their weird little, self-help moments or visions and stuff. And they all draw cards again at the very end of this season. And ultimately what happens is they chase down Shauna. Shauna's daughter, Callie, shoots Lottie in the shoulder, stopping her from trying to kill her. And they all stop, and the mental institution picks up Lottie and takes her out as the season closer. But we have to deal with the problem of the murdered Adam and the cops on their tail. Like, one of the cops was acting like he was a teenager and he was dating Callie a little bit, even though they never like had sex or anything, because he knows where the line was. But Callie tried to tell the actual officer in charge of the investigation that he did in fact have sex with her to try to get him in trouble and off the case and stuff. Didn't end up working. But Misty is connecting with one of her weird group friends, Walter, who is like she's like a citizen investigator thing on a message board somewhere. Well, so was Walter, and he found out the truth just because he's... Did you hear that? That's thunder. We have a massive lightning and thunderstorm rolling right over me right now. Anyway, Shauna is, I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed up here. So Misty and Walter are searching for the disappeared Nat throughout this entire season. And so they're sort of posing as CIA and FBI and like shaking down their friends, trying to figure out what the hell happened to Nat. They ultimately find out that Nat went over to Lottie's weird cult compound. And they also found out that the police are on to Shauna for having killed Adam. And since all the other girls helped cover it up, they're all complicit in the crime as well. And so Walter helps by murdering or setting up the... first of all, he murders the detective in charge and then sets up the second detective as the fall guy, and sort of eliminates the threat of it that way. So supposedly... there's no longer an investigation, which I would argue now there should be another investigation on the actual dead detective, which was their friend. It was a lover that Nat had early in season 1 as an adult, and they hung out, before the plane crash and everything. So it's weird that they just sort of like, okay, like everything's fine now after a dead detective, another detective complicit in the murder, supposedly, and Walter and Misty getting away with it because they're clearly both sociopaths. They're both murderers. They're both like serial killers in training. It didn't make much sense to me. And so the entire evolution of Adam's death spinning out to Misty and Walter's murder of the detectives and aiding all the girls getting back to the compound so that they could have this final death ritual for the wilderness, which is waking up in all of them, only to realize that that doesn't actually happen. And Lottie claims that the death of the detective satisfied the wilderness, even though all the other girls say that there is no wilderness, that it's all in their heads. And so we're left with the young version of the girls eating people and no longer needing Lottie because they're each influenced by the wilderness and hearing his voice in their own way. As adults, refusing that ever even really happened or that it's a thing. And clearly being either murderers or covering up murder and trying to kill their friend and then having that called off when their friend's daughter stops them at gunpoint. And that's the end of the season. So I'm sitting here with my hands in the air going, well, where's this evil, creepy, occult thing creature? Like, that's what I wanted almost more than the cannibalism. But we got the cannibalism. I was super stoked with that. But then there's like the coaches like tried to burn them all down in their house. And he's like hiding out in some weird Pan's Labyrinth cave somewhere. And like, there's still so many questions out there that this season seems like it ignored a lot of the stuff they already addressed or tried to subdue it, brought up some of the stuff, but then proposed new stuff that they never fulfilled satisfying in any satisfying way. And you're just sort of left with your hands up going, well, what the hell is going on? So I have to continue watching every single season just to get the answers that you posed in season 1? Like, that's ridiculous. At some point, you should wrap this bitch up. I'm just getting tired of it. Like, I can't sit here and pretend that I'm enjoying the adult storyline because the adult storyline sucks. And I can't continue to be teased about the kids storyline, even though that's the one that I'm really here for, because I'm getting tired of not being given the goddamn answers. So a slow descent to madness is great in a 2-hour film. A slow descent to madness over 19 hours of a series is too much. Too much, I say, and I'm pointing my finger in the air. You know what that means. Too much. I'll write a letter to someone. It's just, I can't take it anymore. You gotta give me something here, series. God, Yellowjackets, you're killing me. All right. So, all that being said, I was going to do 3.5, and so I just rounded up to 4. But you know what? I'm taking it back down. I can't. It's more frustrating now than it was arguably in season 1, because we've had 9 more hours to explore this. And it has like either tried to renege some of the teases or completely altered what those teases could possibly be. And I know what they're going to do in season 3. They're probably going to end the whole series, and they're probably going to say, oh, they were all wrong, and there is really a wilderness creature, and this is what it ended up being, and they're sort of wrap up the whole story there. But that's too little too late. Like at 19-hour mark, I should have all of the answers that you posed in season 1 checkmarked. It's too much. So you have to end this shit quickly, because I am tired of sitting through this. Oh yeah, and another big closer is that Misty tried to kill Lottie, and she ended up killing Nat. And so Nat dies at the end of season 2 as well. So Bone Tomahawk's dope. I love Bone Tomahawk. That's a great one. I own it. I mean, I love it. It's a great. The brutal scene where the I don't know if you call them barbarians or the tribal men or whatever they are like pulling the legs apart and they're hacking the dude from the groin in half. Oh, that was too much. That was brutal. So yeah, well, that's gonna happen in real life too, Chris. Sean is gonna kill Adam. That's how I go out, I'm sure. All right, so my favorite part of this is, of course, the cannibalism parts. I think and especially with the contrast of the coach not wanting to be involved because he senses the craziness of it. I like that a lot, because then you understand that they're not just doing it to survive, they're sort of going overboard. And there's characters like Misty pushing them there, and now Shauna as well. And that none of these young women who turn into older women are sane. They're all scarred by their experience, as they should be. And I like that. You know, we get a lot of, what is her name? We got a lot of Thaisa sort of imagining she's seeing things that aren't actually there, like her son or a psychiatrist. And it's all in her head. And it is really satisfying when she meets up with Van, and Van's an adult, and we get to see the adult version of Van, and Van is actually has terminal cancer, and she's going to be dying in a few months, which is why she's more than happy to go along with all this craziness again. My hopes for next season is that they end it. They end all of this whole series, and they just answer every question that I still have about the cult, about the creature in the wilderness or the entity, and the real depravity, how far they go as little girls to then explain how tormented they are as women, as adult women. So I really want to see that transition, and you can do it in one season. You don't have to spend tons of time on it. I don't need another 9-10 episode season, which teases into a 4th season, because I won't sit around that long. And you'll be lucky if I watch the 3rd season of this, because I'm getting really, really aggravated. But it does have a promise of good stuff. And that's what keeps me coming back episode after episode. Is it enough to go a whole nother season? Probably, maybe. But I'm probably not going to be happy about it. So maybe it doesn't matter if I just watch it anyway. So, all right, that's going to do it for this review of Yellowjackets Season 2. Have you seen it? What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. I appreciate you tuning live and sort of jiving with on this thing. It's unsatisfying, but there are parts that I do desperately love, and so it just keeps me going. And I don't know, maybe I'm just a masochist. Maybe I just need to eat someone. That's what this all comes down to. As always, remember the evil spelled backwards is live, so get your tookuses out there and be evil.